Hello friends, my name is Aubrey. Welcome back to my channel. I'm so happy to have you all here with me today. So today we are going to do a continuation of this past week's video where I talked about some autumn book recommendations. So I did 6 books in the previous video, which I will link down below if you haven't seen that and would like to go check it out. And I had originally said that we had 6 books to go through this week, but I actually had forgotten a couple. So we actually have 9 books to talk about today. So as I said in last week's video, these are just books that for some reason remind me of fall and the changing of the leaves and the cooler air and just the whole season. So these are books that I personally have read and want to recommend to you guys in case you're looking for some seasonal reads to check out this fall. So we're just going to go ahead and get right into it. So the first book that I have here is one that I forgot last week. But that is The Graveyard Book by Neil Gaiman, and this particular edition is illustrated by Dave McKean. So The Graveyard Book is a middle grade. It is a retelling of The Jungle Book, except instead of our main character being raised by animals, he is being raised by ghosts. So we follow a little boy whose name is Nobody Owens. He goes by Bod, and after Bod's family is tragically killed, he ends up in a graveyard where he ends up being adopted by the ghosts that live in the graveyard. And he has a caretaker who you never really find out what he is, but it's pretty heavily implied that he's a vampire, I think. And I'm so sorry if you can hear Ezio. He's being really clingy, so he's crying outside of the door right now. But yeah, it's just, this book is so atmospheric for, I think it really fits the fall because most of this book does take place in the graveyard. And you know, it's if you've read The Jungle Book or seen the movie, then you're gonna understand the general premise of this story with this little boy being raised in a place by someone who it's like not a typical situation, and then suddenly coming across someone who does live a typical human life with other humans and in this case other like living humans. And it's just, there's also this like lurking sinister character in the background who is, you know, looking for Bod because obviously he didn't find him with the rest of his family. And so Bod's life is in danger, but he's being raised in the cemetery where he's safe. But if he leaves the cemetery, then his life will be in danger, and there's like some magic in here. And it's just really, really fun. And it's really good for fall because you have ghosts and you have this mysterious caretaker who may or may not be a vampire. And it takes place in a graveyard. I guess I should be saying graveyard because it's a graveyard, not a cemetery. Or is it a cemetery? I don't remember. If you don't know, a graveyard is like when it's in the yard of a church, and then a cemetery is when it's not. So I don't remember if it's at a church in here. But so it's just so good and atmospheric, and Neil Gaiman's writing is just so wonderful and whimsical, and I love Neil Gaiman, and I just think that this is just a really, really good book if you're looking for something that's spooky but not too scary, since it is a middle grade. That just has that fall atmosphere to it. And then next I have a fantasy book to recommend, and this one is a classic fantasy by one of my favorite authors of all time, and that is The Hobbit by J.R.R. Tolkien. So this is the prequel to the Lord of the Rings series, and I think that honestly these books also really go well for spring. But The Hobbit in particular, they are trying to get to like complete their journey by a certain day at the end of autumn. And Hobbit Day is in September. So I just think that, you know, having that like cozy vibe with the Shire and then also the adventure going on, I don't know, for some reason it just really makes me think of fall. And so if you don't know what The Hobbit is, we follow Bilbo Baggins, who is a hobbit, very small, and he is joining this group of 13 dwarves to try to retake their homeland within a mountain that has been taken by the dragon Smaug. So Smaug took over years ago. They've kind of been eking out a living elsewhere, but now the heir to the throne is determined to take back their home, and Bilbo gets kind of roped into this grand adventure. And I love Tolkien's writing so much. I will say that if you've read The Lord of the Rings but not The Hobbit does read as a little bit younger, I think. But it's just the pacing in here. Some people say that it's like too slow, but I love it. I love savoring that nice adventure story where we get to travel with the characters, and as they're going through Rivendell and Mirkwood and Dale and getting to Erebor within the Lonely Mountain, and it's just so fun. And I think Mirkwood especially really works well for the fall because it's just infested with these spider webs and, you know, darkness under the trees in the forest. And I don't know, I just think that it's fun. And also when I think of hobbits, I always think of either spring or fall, because the hobbits are just very cozy beings. They are very much appreciative of hearth and home and a garden and a good meal. And it just, like, I have an ambiance video that I love to put on the TV. I've got one for spring where it's like footage from the Shire, which you can actually go visit in New Zealand. But then I have one for the fall that's just like the outside of a little hobbit hole, and there are pumpkins and everything is golden and the leaves are changing, and as it plays the Lord of the Rings music, and as the video goes, it starts to get darker as if night is falling, and it's just so soothing. And I just think that hobbits, because they live such cozy lives, just really embody fall. Spring as well, because of their love for growing things and gardens and flowers and food that they can gather from the earth, and that as well. But so spring and fall. But I think the Hobbit in particular fits fall, as I said, because their journey is taking place kind of towards the end of the year, so during that season. So it's just delightful. It's so fun, and just Bilbo is such, like, his character growth is so fun because he starts out so fussy and particular, and then you see him going through this adventure and bonding with these dwarves he's traveling with, and encountering all these perils, and it just really changes him as a person. And it's just such a fun story. If you love a good adventure story, it's not super long, and I just think it's a delight. Then we have another Neil Gaiman book, and so this is the second one for today, but the third one in the list so far, and that is Neverwear. I love Neverwear so much. So Neverwear, we follow a guy named Richard Mayhew, and one day when he's out with his fiance, he encounters this girl named Dor, and Dor is injured, and Richard, even though his fiance is saying, like, just ignore her, move on, he decides to help her, and he gets enmeshed in this underworld that exists under, London, that exists under London. And he starts to encounter this world that he didn't even know existed, where people who kind of fall through the cracks and exist beyond the borders of society. And just this magical, it's like magical realism in a way, because there's literally, it's not just a metaphor, there's literally this entire society that exists underground, under the streets of London. And there is magic, and the Marquis de Carabas, I love him. He's one of my favorite characters. But Dor is being hunted down by these two people who are trying to find her and to capture her, and potentially and she's trying to solve this mystery that her father left behind for her, and Richard just finds himself suddenly a part of all of this, and learning about this new society and realizing that the life he had is no longer his life. Like, can he go back to that? Is that even an option for him? And it's so good, and it does have so much commentary on the people that society as a whole tends to ignore and almost doesn't see, because once you become part of this underground world, your old life almost disappears. You no longer belong to it, and that it presents itself very physically in some ways, in the way that you then interact with other people, in the way, well, more the way that they interact with you. And so it has a lot of commentary, but it is also just, like all of Neil Gaiman's works, so atmospheric. It is so dark and creepy, and most of it takes place underground. Occasionally they're emerging out into mainstream London, but it really is very gothic in ways and just so magical and mysterious, and you are just, or at least I was on the edge of my seat as I was reading this, just trying to figure out what was going on, what is up with this mystery that Dora's trying to solve, what's gonna happen to her and Richard, like what's gonna happen to all of these characters. It's so good. It is so fun and so whimsical but dark at the same time. And I just think that darkness and that like almost gothic kind of grungy, grimy feeling of being underground and meeting all of these people who live in very unique and interesting ways that would not be ways that people would live in like polite society. It's just so interesting, and it is so fun and so atmospheric. That I think is the best word to describe this book, and I cannot recommend it enough. I think that if you like, again, creepy, dark, but it's not horror, but it is definitely creepy and dark and kind of gloomy at times, but also with commentary and magic, and it's just so fun. You should definitely try this one. It's great. I love it. This next one I hesitated to put on the list, honestly, because it is based off of a movie. So this book was written, as far as I know, after the movie. So the movie is the original source material, but I love this movie. It is one of my favorite movies to watch every fall leading up to Halloween. And so I did want to recommend it. If you haven't seen the movie, I do recommend that you watch that first because it is great. But if you have seen the movie and didn't know that this book adaptation existed, like I didn't until last year, then I want to recommend it to you. And that is ParaNorman. So the book is by Elizabeth Cody Kimmel, and it's illustrated by Ross Stewart. And ParaNorman, like I said, this book is based off of the movie. So we follow a boy named Norman Babcock, and he has the ability to see ghosts. So he can communicate with, see the dead, except nobody believes him. Nobody believes that he's telling the truth. He's made fun of at school. His family kind of, his mom is like supportive, but she doesn't necessarily believe that he's telling the truth. But his dad and his older sister are both very much of the opinion that he's making it up, or that it's something that, even if it is true, that he should hide and keep hidden because the town kind of sees him as crazy. And so Norman is dealing with this, and then one day he, like, on top of just being a kid and dealing with all of the issues of going to middle school, he's also just dealing with this power that he has, that he's always had, that nobody will believe him about. And then one day he finds out about a prophecy, because the town that he lives in has a story about a witch who was caught and executed years ago. And he finds out that there's a prophecy that the witch will rise from her grave and take revenge on the town if Norman, who is now inheriting this task from his predecessor, doesn't stop it. So that's kind of where the story goes. We have zombies, we have ghosts, we have witches. It's so fun, and it is so perfect for fall. And I love Norman's character because he really is just trying to, like, he always knows that he's telling the truth and doesn't hide who he is, but he also recognizes that other people see the way that he behaves and the things he says as something to be ashamed of, or something to hide, or something that's not normal. And so even though he knows that it is, others' opinions also have an effect on him. So seeing him like come into his own and learning to push back against that is great. And also, like I said, we've got zombies, we have witches, we have ghosts, we have a ragtag group of kids and teenagers trying to fix this situation, and it's so fun. The movie is by Leica, who do like stop motion animation. I mentioned them last week actually, because I'm pretty sure they're also the ones who did the Coraline movie. But I love ParaNorman. It is such a fun movie. It is so good, and I watch it at least once every fall. And when I found out that there was a book adaptation, I had to check it out. So I actually read this, I think it was last year. If not, it was the year before, but I think it may have been last year. And it is just as fun as the movie. I will say they do change some things. So I've mentioned this in previous videos. I'm not sure why original source material gets changed. In this case, it's like the opposite because it was originally a movie and got changed for the book. So I'm not sure why they chose to do that. So some things are different in the book than they are in the movie, but it is still really fun if you're a fan of the movie to then get to read it in book form. And one thing that I really like is just all the nods to the original film, because there's a book of stories, of fairy tales, that is very important in the movie and in the book. And they designed the naked hardcover to look like that book of fairy tales, which I think is really cool. They also, the end papers are Norman's wallpaper in the movie in his bedroom, which is also cool. And it is illustrated. So if you look, let me find. So the book is illustrated. It has little illustrations with each chapter, which is also really cute and really fun. And again, this one is a middle grade book. I think it's not an adult book, so it's a quick read. It's really fun, but I highly recommend the movie. And if you're a fan of the movie, I think that this is a good little companion to read with it and just enjoy yourself and have a good time. So then the next book that I have to show you guys is actually a graphic novel. And this one was really popular on BookTube a couple of years ago, I think. And it is just so quintessentially fall. And that is Pumpkinheads. This is by Rainbow Rowell and Faith Erin Hicks. And it is about two teenagers who work together at a pumpkin patch and have every year, at least every year of high school. I'm not sure if they worked there before that or not. But this is their last year there before they go off to college, graduate high school, go off into the world, the workforce, college, wherever they're going. And our female main character, and I can't remember their names, Deja. So Deja and Josiah. So Deja wants to make this the best year at the pumpkin patch ever and get to try all of the treats and go explore all that the pumpkin patch has to offer. Whereas Josiah, who is very kind of reserved and shy, he just wants to talk to a girl who works there, who he's had a crush on for years. And Deja's like, you know what? We're gonna do that. It is my mission. I'm gonna make sure you get to talk to this girl. And so they go on this adventure through the pumpkin patch to track her down, and that's literally the whole story. And it's so cute. Like, let me show you the map. So there's a map of the pumpkin patch, and they go to all these different places, and they're like trying all the snacks, like the kettle corn and the caramel apples, and there's a corn maze and a pumpkin patch, and just, it's so cute. It is just so perfectly fall. The art style is adorable. Josiah is such a precious character. He is just so sweet. And Deja is so fun. Like, she is the outgoing friend, and she just wants, she knows everybody. She has no qualms about talking to people, and just kind of, she's just dragging Josiah along on this journey to go talk to his crush. So it's really, really cute. There's like no stakes in here, whatever, pretty much. They're literally just going through a pumpkin patch, and they, you know, encounter children who are there playing. There's a little train ride. It's just so cute. And it just really makes you feel nostalgic for going to places like this. And especially, at least for me, I mean, I still love to go to them as an adult, but it just like makes me really appreciate them and remember how much fun they are as when you're a kid. And I don't know, I still love them. I'm still such a big kid because I love to go to things like this. I'm actually going to go to the fair in a little while, so but it's just so cute. It just really makes you think of that wonderful chilly fall season where you get to go explore these places that only crop up once a year. And it's so good, and I love it. And it's a graphic novel, so it's a very short read, and you get to look at all of the autumnal images, and it's just very, very nice. So then, moving away from the cozy, I now have some scarier recommendations for you. So I will say I'm not a big horror fan. I don't really read horror. I used to watch horror movies some when I was younger, but they were never really my thing. I mostly just watched them because I had friends who liked to watch them. but I do like scary. I'm just not a big fan of horror, if that makes sense. Like, I like the spooky Halloween, October vibe, but horror is not really my thing. That being said, there are some exceptions. So this first one is, I think it is classified as horror, but to me, it's just like that spooky, scary, creepy, dark kind of story. And it is like my favorite scary Halloween story, and that is Something Wicked This Way Comes by Ray Bradbury. So this is a classic. Lots of people have read Ray Bradbury, but a lot of people I think know him more for some of his other works like Fahrenheit 451. But this is my favorite by him. I love this book so, so, so much. So this is all about these two boys who go to this carnival. What is it called? Cougar and Dark's Pandemonium Shadow Show. And they live in Illinois, and this carnival, this show comes to town, and they decide to go and experience it. They think it's going to be fun, but it turns out to be very sinister. And I don't really want to say too much more than that because I don't want to spoil anything. I feel like when I went into this, that's all that I knew. And I think that made the experience like that much more enjoyable and like chilling because you don't know what to expect. But it is definitely the scary carnival story. So we've got like calliopes and circus tents and just that scary carnival feeling. And it takes place, I think, at Halloween. Does it not? Yes, it takes place in October, so it is perfect for fall because you have that October setting. These two boys in this small town going to this carnival that turns out to be very much not fun and lighthearted, and lots of spooky, sinister things are going on, and it's just so good. Again, I don't want to say too much else about what happens in here because I really think that just finding out as you go makes the experience so much better. But it is really good. I love this book. I read it for the first time I was either in middle school or high school. I think it may have been high school, and I was just hooked immediately. So I'll just read you a little bit from the first page. It says, "First of all, it was October, a rare month for boys. Not that all months aren't rare, but there be good and bad, as the pirates say. Take September, a bad month. School begins. Consider August, a good month. School hasn't begun yet. July, well, July's really fine. There's no chance in the world for school. June, no doubting it, June's best of all, for the school doors spring wide and September's a billion years away. But you take October now. School's been on a month and you're riding easier in the rains, jogging along. You got time to think of the garbage you'll dump on Old Man Pricket's porch or the hairy ape costume you'll wear to the YMCA the last night of the month. And if it's around October 20th and everything's smoky smelling and the sky orange and ash gray at twilight, it seems Halloween will never come in a fall of broomsticks and a soft flap of bed sheets around corners. But one strange, wild, dark, long year, Halloween came early. One year, Halloween came on October 24th, 3 hours after midnight." It's just so good, and again, very atmospheric. It's a classic, and I just recommend it for anyone who likes scary, who loves Halloween, who loves October. This is just the best. And then I have a ghost story to recommend to you. So again, horror is not necessarily my thing, but there is one horror movie that I really enjoy watching, and that is The Woman in Black. And I found out that it was based on a book, and so I got the book to read. And this is by Suzanne Hill. I will say, if you've seen the movie and not read the book like I had, the book is quite different. The same basic premise is shared between the two, but the story itself is very different, and I feel like the feeling it gives you is also very different. So essentially we follow a character named Arthur Kipps, who at the very beginning of this book, he is enjoying Christmas with his family, with his children and his grandchildren and his wife, and they ask him to tell a scary story. And he declines because he has a story that actually happened to him. when he was younger, and it was very traumatizing. And so then he does end up telling us this story, and we get to see what happened to him from his perspective. And so it is written in a first person perspective. And we get to see Arthur when he was younger. He worked at a law firm, and he gets a job to go to this very small, isolated village to handle the affairs of an elderly lady who has just passed away. And she was a recluse. She lived in this big house by herself. She was kind of shut off from even the other people in the town where her house is, and her house is set far back, like through these marshes. And when he gets there, is going to this lady's funeral, and he starts noticing a woman dressed all in black who is appearing in these different areas. And he finds out that there is a legend of the ghost. There is some mystery about who this woman is, why she's there, what she's doing, what she wants, that is connected to this old house and this lady who has passed away. And that's really all that I want to say. But again, the movie, if you've seen it, is very different. I think the movie really relied heavily on the jump scares and being an actual horror story, whereas this one is much more focused on being a ghost story. And I do think that there is a difference. So this one is much more like that slow, creeping horror that just makes you feel chilled and cold and creeped out and scared. And whereas the movie is very much like, Ashy, it's okay, is very much intending on making you jump and scream, and has a darker tone to it in a certain way that I don't really want to spoil in case you haven't seen the movie and you don't know what happens there or what is going on with the ghost. But it is darker in a way than the book is. But I do think that the book is really fun. I think that it's a really good story. It would also be good for winter, but that tradition of telling ghost stories in the winter. But I think that for me, ghost stories really make me think of Halloween for obvious reasons. And this one, it was just really enjoyable. Like I said, it's that type of scary and that type of horror that just gives you chills, if that makes sense. Because you've got this big empty house full of all of this lady's belongings and her papers, surrounded by these marshes, isolated. This young man who is trying to sort through everything on his own, and is very much an outsider in this town, and is trying to figure out what's going on. And then this mysterious woman who keeps appearing in places that she shouldn't. So that's really all that I want to say. If you like ghost stories and you like to be creeped out, this is a good one, because it did creep me out a little bit. I'm not gonna lie. All right, so 2 books left. The first one is actually more of just an author recommendation, and then the second one I have a nonfiction for you. So the first one, there wouldn't be a fall list if I didn't include Edgar Allan Poe. I love Edgar Allan Poe. He is just the king of spooky short stories. And I think that every fall reading list should include some of his works. So I'm not saying you need to read his entire oeuvre, or his entire, what is it called? His entire canon of work. But I do think that you should read some Edgar Allan Poe in the fall, because it's great. We have the classics like The Black Cat and The Telltale Heart and The Mask of the Red Death and The Cask of Amontillado and The Fall of the House of Usher. But he also has some poetry that is also just spooky and chilling and atmospheric and just gloomy at times. And I just think that his works are just they just embody the dark and the gothic and the scary so well in such short, bite-sized stories. And they're so fun to read. And his language is beautiful. I think that the way that he uses language, the way that he writes is just amazing. And some of them do freak me out a little bit. I love them, but The Telltale Heart, I love it, but why, But it's just so fun. I think that Edgar Allan Poe is just a staple for the spooky months and the spooky season and Halloween. And I don't know, I just think that he's great. And I think that if you haven't read any Edgar Allan Poe, this is your sign to do so. If you have read some Poe, but it's been a while, this is your sign to revisit him. And if you've read Poe, but you haven't read all of his stuff and you're missing some of those quintessential stories, or you've never checked out his poetry, I implore you to do so, because it is grand and creepy and exquisite. And then the last book that I have for this list is, as I said, a nonfiction book, but I read this book in the fall and I think that it was just so fun. I actually would take it with me when my church was doing their like pumpkin patch where we were selling pumpkins. My mom and I would sign up to work together on some days, and I took this book with me to read while we were on shift. And it is just so good. If you like history and you like dark, macabre history, you're gonna love this one. But that is The Invention of Murder, How the Victorians Reveled in Death and Detection and Created Modern Crime by Judith Flanders. Now I will say, this sounds like it's going to be scary. It's not. This is very much historical. It is, as I said, nonfiction, and it is all about, in the Victorian era, the first rise of like a police force and detectives, because apparently detective work was not always a thing. So learning about how for a long time in England, they did not try to prevent crime, and they did not try to like solve crime using deductive reasoning and clues, and it was very much based on witness testimony, which obviously can be very flawed and not always a good system. So it talks about all of that, and it talks about so many different murders and court cases, and it can get quite gruesome at times, so I will warn you of that. If you do not like macabre and you do not like the morbid, then don't read this, because Judith Flanders does not shy away from explaining to you what happened to these people, and then also seeing who was arrested, who was tried, who was found guilty. And there are a lot of times in here where I personally did not believe that the guilty parties were actually the ones who committed the crime. And so just there is a lot of injustice that's discussed in here as well. And I think she does a really good job of not necessarily taking sides. Like, she presents both opinions that were going around at the time. She discusses kind of the spectacle of the public execution, and how that fascination with the public, which was very dark and gruesome and not healthy for actually, like, for a good justice system to be established. So a lot of that is covered in here, so it can get quite sad at times, but it just, for some reason, I've mentioned before that Victorian settings really fit fall and winter for me. And just because of the subject matter, I just thought that this one was a really good one to read in the fall, and I learned a lot that I didn't know about the Victorian era, and of some of these cases, though, I had actually heard about because of podcasts that I listened to, like Lore by Aaron Mahnke. I'll put the little his little logo up there if you would like to check that out. I love Lore. It's great. Again, though, if you don't like the morbid and the gruesome, don't listen to Lore. But Lore is fantastic. Let me just give you a podcast recommendation. Lore is great if you like folk tales and folklore and legends and murder and mysteries. He covers everything from cryptids to serial killers. It's great. Especially for the fall. It definitely fits this list. But so some of these cases I had actually heard about from him. But a lot of them were new for me, and a lot of the information, like the background about the people who were trying to solve these crimes and whether or not certain people were actually potentially guilty or not, I had no idea. And I really think that it was very well done, very educational, and also just really easily accessible, I think, the way that she writes. Like, it doesn't really read like a textbook. It definitely reads like nonfiction and historical and educational, but not didactic. So I really enjoyed it. I highly recommend it if you want to learn something and you want to take a closer look at what the Victorian justice system was like and the evolution of the art of detection, because I thought that part was really fascinating. Alright, so those are 9 more books that I think are really good to read in the fall. And again, I will link part 1 down below if you would like to check that out. But I love fall. It is my favorite season, with spring coming in second. And I just love the atmosphere, and I love to read in the fall. I think that it is such a good time to read, and I think a lot of people feel that same way. So I have a number of books that I'm hoping to read this autumn or some autumn in the future. And I actually did a video on those as well for like my fall TBR. So I'll link that below as well if you want to look at that and get maybe some more recommendations for your own fall TBR, your own autumnal reading list. But yeah, thank you guys so much for watching. If you have any recommendations for me or for any of the other viewers, please leave them in the comments of any books that you think are really good to read in the fall. I love to add new books to my TBR, which is ever growing. Or if you've read any of these books and you would like to discuss them, tell me what you thought of them, just please keep your comments spoiler free. Or if you are now planning on reading any of these books, I would love to hear that too. I love to recommend things to people. So if you want to leave an emoji, since we have a ghost story this time, let's do a little ghost emoji. You can either leave it with your comment, or if you don't know what to say but you want to let me know that you were here, you can just pop a little ghost emoji down there. I love to talk to you guys in the comments, so it always makes me very happy. But yeah, thank you all so much for watching. I hope that you are having a wonderful day or a wonderful night wherever you are, that you're finding lots of good books to read this fall, and I will see you in my next video. Bye!